I shared with somebody earlier in regards to our name. A lot of people have trouble pronouncing our name. And you do? Okay. Well, I'm fixing to tell you how to pronounce our last name. If you know the deer creature called the gazelle, everybody knows that, and everybody knows their shin bone, right? Okay. Gazelle shin. Gazelle shin. So that makes it easy. When I was praying for a husband, and I prayed a long time, I was 47 before Kaylin and I married, I told the Lord, I don't want to be Smith, Jones, Black, or White. I want a different last name. So the Lord heard my prayer, and He brought me the perfect man. I have no doubt in my mind that I married the right man, and I'm so thankful. I'm so thankful. So what I'd like to share with you this afternoon, it's always a challenge to have the afternoon talk when everybody has eaten. So my job this afternoon is to keep you awake. And so I may have you stand up at some point if I see eyes getting a little droopy here. I really feel passionate about the topic of mold. And the reason that I do is because of my own personal experience. And I will share some of my personal experience during this talk. There was a time frame when I really thought mold was going to be the death of me. You know, between that and the Rocky Mountain spotted fever, I thought that I was done for. But the Lord saw differently, and He led me to do a lot of research, and I've learned a lot, and I've been able to help a lot of people with this. And so I want to share with you some of my experience and the things that I've learned about mold. Did you know the Bible has a lot to say about mold?
Yes.
Did you know the Spirit of Prophecy has a lot to say about mold? That does. I'm going to show you today. You'll be amazed. So nothing that I share today is to be construed as medical advice, and that this hickey ain't working here. Okay, we got it. Okay. This is not advice. This is just educational information. I encourage you to do your own research. Brother Claude may have seen something like this. Have you seen that before in HVAC systems? That's the inside of an HVAC system. Somebody's heating an air unit. There, the big picture on your left. If you look in the picture with the shower, you see there's just a little bit of mold up in the ceiling. If you see that on the inside of your house, that other picture just above it is what the sheetrock looks on the backside. That's what it looks like on the backside. So this was the first house that Kaylin and I moved into when we moved to Kentucky. Was a rental. And when we walked in, we rented it sight unseen because we had to rent something from North Dakota. So I got online and I found this little rental house. It was a cute little house. And it was in a valley next to a creek. It was so beautiful. But they didn't tell us that house had flooded. And when we walked in, we saw, like what you see there in the shower, that was all the way around the top. All the way around the whole house. And the floor of that house was concrete, and water would stand on that, when it was, damp outside. You could see water just beating up through the concrete. Apparently, they did not put a vapor barrier down underneath the concrete before they poured it. So, these are just some pictures of different houses that are severely contaminated. And I have seen houses listed on real estate sites that say, do not enter. This house is for whatever, but do not enter without protective equipment. And so I know that it probably looks like this on the inside. And we're going to talk tonight about why this is so dangerous. Now you see that picture of that moldy bread there. How many of you have ever had a piece of fruit or something that had a little tiny spot on it, and you think, well, I'm going to cut that out because the rest of it's good? Don't do that anymore, because they have taken these electron microscope photographs with that, and the hyphae, or the little fingers of the mold, is all the way through to the other side of that piece of fruit, even if you just see a tiny spot on it. So just toss the thing. It's not worth your life, okay? And this stuff is deadly. 7 million deaths globally are linked to indoor air pollution, and much of this is directly related to mold, indoor mold. Invasive mold infections can and indeed have been fatal in as much as 50% of cases. Often people who die with mystery illnesses, if they would have tested and taken it back, taken a history, I guarantee you there would have been a connection with mold toxicity. The most common species or strain of mold is Aspergillus, and there are many different types of Aspergillus, and they produce some very deadly mycotoxins. Aspergillus is the mold aflatoxin, ochratoxin A, and I think even gliotoxin are different mycotoxins produced by aflatoxin. I'm going to explain all this as we go on, so I know I'm throwing out some big words here, but bear with me, okay? All of you have probably heard about black mold, right? The dangerous black mold. Well, that's what we know as Stachybotrys. That's the name of that mold, and it's arguably the most deadly of the molds. It produces some really nasty mycotoxins that have actually been used in biological warfare. How many of you have heard of Gulf War syndrome? Mold, mycotoxins have been implicated in that. Some people believe that that was from mycotoxins. And it kind of makes sense when you look at the symptom clusters that the soldiers had. It really does kind of line up and make sense, and you'll see what I mean here in just a minute. Mold-related illnesses carry a cost of $5.6 billion annually, and I think that's a moderate estimate. Up to 85% of buildings in the U.S. are contaminated with mold. You think about that. Even new houses. I have had clients come to me with mold toxicity and they just built a house. And part of the problem, Yemi and I were talking about this the other day, part of the problem with modern construction techniques, these houses are so tight, they can't breathe. You know, there's really no ventilation, and the moisture content inside just goes up, 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 and there's really not enough air exchange. Open your windows, get that air exchange in there. Now, mold does harm everyone, but there's about 25%, that's an estimate, of the population that has a specific genetic defect, and yours truly has that causes him not to be able to detox mold. My husband and I recently, I think I shared last night that from October to January, I was nauseated and throwing up for all those months. Couldn't figure out what was wrong. We did some testing, found out I had Giardia. Long story short, we also did some genetic testing, and we found out that due to the tick disease, the mold, and all that, my genetic age, my metabolic age, is 95. So I'm older than all of y'all in here. So, current research suggests that most chronic illnesses have a mold toxicity component, and I believe it's also parasites. There's a very strong connection between parasites and mold toxicity, and also tick-borne diseases. A lot of people who have any type of tick-borne disease are extremely sensitive to mold. When a mold, especially not all molds produce mycotoxins, which is the toxic thing that they produce. It's kind of like their guns. They produce it to suppress other life around them so that they can grow and spread. Now, some research that was done by Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt showed that when mold, mycotoxin producing mold, is exposed to Wi-Fi or EMF radiation, it produces up to 600 times more mycotoxins. So if you live close to a cell tower, if you have Wi-Fi in your home and you have mold in your home, you're going to have far more mycotoxins in your house than if you're not exposed to those things. It's a really good idea to turn your Wi-Fi off at night. You're really not using it at night anyway. So 93% of chronic sinus infections have been attributed to mold, and we'll talk more about that later on in the talk. There's a specific sinus infection that I am also dealing with now. We tested for that too, and I am dealing with this. If you hear me going, that's why, because I'm dealing with this thing. I'll share with you about that in just a little bit. Any type of water damage, whether it's a leaky pipe, a flood, condensation on your windows, in the bathroom, all of these can facilitate a growth of mold. in as little as 24 hours. So that really needs to be dried up quickly if you have mold. And this is why it's such an issue for the people an hour or so away from here who were devastated by Hurricane Helene. You know, they are going to be dealing with a lot of mold toxicity. So it's very important that you, as fellow citizens of North Carolina, educate yourselves so that you know how to recognize and help others who are exposed to mold. It grows very quickly in wet environments, and so you need to clean that up. And it's not just the indoor environment. When there's an outdoor environment like here and where we lived in Kentucky before we sold our farm, you get a lot of rain all throughout Appalachia. You have a higher mold spore count in general anyway. You put that on the inside of the house, and it's a recipe for disaster. Okay, let's move on. Now, if you know somebody that's got a weird sickness and the doctors say all your numbers look fine, everything looks good, but they're still sick, they're still dizzy, they're still whatever, suspect mold. Okay? Let's look at this. If you know somebody that there's a history of flooding, water damage in their home, or condensation around the windows or whatever, if they're constantly sick and stuffy, if they have a metallic taste in their mouth. When I was at my sickest with mold, it tasted like I was sucking on magnesium or something. I just had a constant metallic taste in my mouth, and everything I touched shocked me. And that's a key thing that goes along with mold toxicity as well. Fatigue, aches and pains, drowsiness. Is anybody in here drowsy right now? Do we need to stand up? I know it's a little warm in here. Is everybody okay? Okay, good. Eye irritation. Eye and throat irritation were the main symptoms that my husband had when we were in these moldy houses that we rented. But he was out of the home a lot working, and I was in the home doing the web page and the ministry and all this stuff and housekeeping. And so I was exposed to it a lot more than Kaylin was. Unexplained dizziness and difficulty concentrating, severe brain fog, breathing issues, sore throat, digestive issues, nausea, vomiting, carbohydrate craving, a musty smell. Some of these mycotoxins, specifically the one that I mentioned that is black mold, Stachybotrys, it smells like cat urine. So if your basement or your house smells like a cat's been down there doing his business, you better check, because that could be Stachybotrys, which is the bad stuff. When I was really sick with mold, I remember one time I went to the grocery store and I was so... Mold is called, I'll kind of share this with you before we get on further. It actually was nicknamed by Dr. Dale Bredesen inhalational Alzheimer's. Inhalational Alzheimer's. You hear me now and I'm fairly fluent, but there was a time when I was very sick when I couldn't get my words. I could not get my words out. I couldn't remember anybody's name hardly. And I remember one day Kaylin was working and I had to go get groceries. And I went to Kroger and I was holding on to the cart the whole time in the store because I was so dizzy. It's a different kind of dizzy. It's like your brain is spinning inside of your head, like somebody has your brain in a salad spinner. You know, that's what it feels like. And you're trying to walk straight and look normal when your brain is spinning in your head. Well, I finished in the grocery store. I got out to the car and I totally forgot how to drive, what I was supposed to do, and where I was supposed to go. And I just sat there and prayed. I said, God, I don't know what to do. And I was scared. I was really scared. And after about 10 minutes, I kind of calmed down a little bit. I was able to remember how to crank the car, and I started getting it and, leaving the parking lot. And then I remember sitting at the red light in an absolute panic because I didn't know what that light meant. Wow. I had no idea. And I saw the other cars moving, and I thought, what do I do? And thankfully, it was the dual turn lanes. So when the car next to me started to go, I knew it was my turn to go. So I turned, and as I went at each step of the trip home, I realized, okay, I recognized this. And I was able to find my way home. But that's how bad, that's how severe the mold can affect. It crosses, these mycotoxins cross the blood-brain barrier. They go right straight into the brain. And so that was a very scary experience for me, because I'm usually together. I usually, can handle things fairly well. Here's some more symptoms of mold toxicity. Skin elasticity changes, heart palpitations. This was one of the things that convinced my husband that there was really something wrong with me, because he was giving me a hug one day and my heart was just racing and pounding and hadn't done anything. And so he realized something's wrong, and that's when he made me go to the doctor kicking and screaming. I didn't want to go. Low libido, chronic fatigue, vision loss. We'll talk more about the vision loss in just a little bit. Why that happens and what happens. Eye irritation, sinus congestion, new onset of autoimmune disease, that happened to me. Fever, night sweats, sleep disturbance, anxiousness and depression. Normally I'm not an anxious person. I'm usually pretty calm. But with the mold toxicity, I could be looking around thinking, why do I feel like I need to be running from a bear? My insides were just on overdrive with anxiety, but my head is sitting there looking at everything thinking, there's no reason for this. And so I had that consciousness, but it's like my body had been hijacked to be anxious. Brain fog, joint pains, headaches, skin rashes, and severe dizziness, and my dizziness was definitely severe. Now here's the visual contrast disturbance. Mycotoxins cross, as I said, the blood-brain barrier, and it actually causes a problem with the retinal nerve so that you can't see visual contrast between colors. So a lot of people that have mold illness, and my vision after mold illness I didn't used to have to wear these all the time, but now it's just a blur in front of me. So my vision was definitely damaged by the mold because of these mycotoxins. And in the following slide, I'm going to show you this slide. If you have 8, this is a cluster of symptoms. According to Dr. Richie Shoemaker, there's a test online that you can take to test your visual acuity to see if you have that visual disturbance. If you take that test and you fail it, and you have 8 of these clusters of symptoms, you have a 98% chance of having something called chronic inflammatory response syndrome. Does anybody remember hearing the term cytokine storm during COVID? Those of us who have mold toxicity live in cytokine storm. Massive inflammation. That's what's causing all of these brain problems and dizziness and severe pain, respiratory issues, is this chronic inflammatory response syndrome. When I was sick, I had every single symptom on this chart except night sweats. That's the only symptom that I did not have. So this topic is kind of real to me. According to Dr. Peter Osborne, mycotoxins exposure looks almost like radiation poisoning, and it destroys your genetics. And we see that with my genetic test. All of my genetic switches for detoxification were turned off, every single one of them. And so I'm working now to turn on my detox pathways again and hopefully reverse my genetic age so that I last a little longer. But I believe Jesus is coming soon anyway. So mold destroys your genetics, and it really wreaked havoc on mine, and that's because you have so many reactive oxygen species of free radicals. You just have this massive oxidative damage. Mold affects the collagen, so you have skin aging, blood vessel aging, bone and tooth loss. I lost 5 teeth to mold toxicity. 5 teeth abscessed on me or cracked, and I lost them. So here's some bedfellows of mold toxicity. These are things that kind of go, I realize my font is a little bit small, but I mentioned the chronic inflammatory response syndrome. These are all syndromes, which means basically clusters of symptoms that they diagnose as these certain syndromes. Postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, I had that. Mast cell activation syndrome, still dealing with that. Autoimmunity, that's me. Chronic fatigue, yep. Didn't have muscular sclerosis, ALS, or Parkinson's, thank the Lord. SIBO and SIFO, that's, does somebody have a question? Was there a question?
No, it's
okay, good. Okay. Small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or small intestinal fungal overgrowth. I had both of those. I had actually aspergillus growing in my gut. I had it so bad. Now you can inhale these mycotoxins. They go right through your skin. We'll talk about how small they are in just a minute. So it's very easy to get them. Liver and other cancers, tick-borne diseases, and others. Okay. Now, what is a mycotoxin versus a mold spore? A mold spore is like the mold seed. It's kind of like if you've ever been out in nature and you've seen a mushroom and it's got like this powder underneath it. Those are mold spores. But those spores produce mycotoxins that are much smaller than the spores. Okay? Let's take 5 seconds and let's stand up. Everybody stand up. I know it's warm in here. Maybe we can turn the air down a little bit. And kind of stand on your tippy toes. We just ate. Everybody's got a full belly. It's easy to get sleepy. I understand that. Okay. Take a little break there. Stand up. Okay. Very good. Okay. We can sit down. I think everybody's awake now.
Oh yeah.
Okay, can you see it better now? Okay, good. So, mold spores are between 1 and 20 microns in diameter, but a mycotoxin is like 0.1 micron. So it's much, much, much smaller. In fact, the Tyvek suits that they often wear to protect themselves when they do mold cleanup are really not adequate because the mycotoxins can go right through that. They're so small. They go right through your skin, they go right into your blood vessels, and they go right into your cells. They're very extremely bioavailable, okay? And you can get them, you can inhale them, they go through your skin, you can swallow them. They're just very easy to get into our body. We really need to take the mold things very seriously, and the Bible does take it seriously. Okay. Jill, help me. It's not going. Okay, there we go. So here's some common mycotoxins. We mentioned the Stachybotrys already. That is a mold. It produces the mycotoxins that are satrotoxins. That's the black mold. Aspergillus produces several mycotoxins, gliotoxin, ochratoxin A, and aflatoxin. And there are literally hundreds of different molds and different mycotoxins. So these are just a few of the most common ones that I want to share with you. Okay? And this chart is really not, I think I skipped it on this, but I have a chart on my end. I think I didn't put it in this one. But mycotoxins are largely in grains. So you have to be very careful about your grains. If they're not stored properly, you know, my husband is from North Dakota. A lot of those grains are harvested. It's raining and stuff. They put them in these huge bins and they turn fans on them to circulate the air. Very easy for mold to grow in there. My husband and I both have had the experience where we had to go into a silo to shovel out grain, and we've both gotten sick. You know, and so I believe it's largely the mycotoxins that are in there. So these some mycotoxins are neurotoxic, which means they damage your nerves. Some are nephrotoxic, they damage your kidneys. Some are hepatotoxic, they damage your liver. Some are cytotoxic, they damage your cells. But all of them are toxic to our guts. They just basically rip holes in your gut. If you have exposure to mycotoxins, you are very highly at risk for having leaky gut syndrome. Mold toxicity can mimic many other diseases. When I had it, I thought I had heart disease. I thought I had kidney disease. I had kidney pain. I thought I had diabetes because I was just thirsty all the time, and it would go right through me. I would drink a glass of water, have to trot to the bathroom. everything it was just right through me. And I thought I had diabetes. Okay, mold toxicity again destroys the lining of the gut, resulting in leaky gut, and this can lead to autoimmune disease. Whenever you have problems with your gut lining, very high risk for developing autoimmune disease. Mold exposure, I believe, is one of the largest health threats in the world today, but how much do you hear about it? How much do you hear about it? Very little, very little. And these toxins are fat soluble, so people just tend to pack on weight when they have mold toxicity, because the body's like, I gotta have somewhere to put the trash. So people are trying to lose weight and they can't because they're toxic. Many toxins, not just mycotoxins, are fat soluble. So I tell people that are trying to lose weight, if you're trying to lose weight, detox. Because you get rid of the toxins, the body will let go of the fat. Okay? Mold allergy is a real thing, and so is mold toxicity. They're very different. Mold allergy is basically just a respiratory thing from the mold spores. Because again, not everybody is as sensitive as I am, or others may be, to the mycotoxins. Mycotoxins are just that, they are toxic. They actually, as I mentioned earlier, they just wreak havoc on the nervous system, the kidneys, the liver. People can be so toxic with mycotoxins that in their bile, which is produced by the liver, stored in the gallbladder, emulsifies fat and all that stuff, gets rid of toxins. They can have so many mold toxins that they have more mold toxins than bile in their bile. And these people are acutely ill and chronically, they're very sick people. I already shared about the inhalational Alzheimer's and stuff. So, it's through our minds that we worship God, and I believe that mycotoxins are the perfect invention of the devil to hijack our minds, because now with the invention, with the modern building techniques, along with now we have 5G and Wi-Fi and all that cause mycotoxins, molds, to produce 600 times more mycotoxins, we don't have a chance. Our minds are just blasted with these things. So I want to show you from the Bible what the Bible has to say. In Leviticus 14, 33 through 57, we're not going to read all of that. But Leviticus 14, 33 through 57, the Bible calls mold leprosy of a house. Leprosy of a house. There's very, very specific directions on how a house is to be cleaned of mold. Nobody follows this today. Nobody. Okay? If mold or mildew is seen or suspected, it was to be reported to the priest. The house was then evacuated and emptied. If mold was seen in the house, the people left, all of the stuff left, everything left if mold was seen. How many people do that today? Nobody. Okay? If mold is suspected, the priest came and looked at it. If mold is suspected, the house is closed up for a week. The priest returns after a week, and if it's spread, all the affected stones are removed and taken without the camp. The plaster inside the house is all scraped off and removed to without the city. The stones in the plaster are then replaced, and if the mold returns, the house is torn down and destroyed, and everything moved outside of the city. If it didn't spread, the house has to undergo a very thorough and intense ceremonial cleaning. And the priest did that. So I want to share with you from the Spirit of Prophecy some things that Sister White had to say about mold. I think you'll find this very interesting. Who knew that Sister White lost 2 children to mold toxicity? Did anybody? Okay, one person knew that. Let me show you. This is from the Health Reformer. We have been exposed on our late journey to death in the spare bed. We have taken colds that have settled upon the lungs, causing soreness of the flesh. You remember what I said? It causes a lot of pain. Since our fears have been aroused, we have been careful and have been under the necessity of close questioning regarding our beds. In some cases, we have removed the bed clothing and have dried it by the fire before we ventured to sleep. This may have given the impression that we are very particular and perhaps notional. We own that we are particular. We value life which God has preserved by a miracle of His mercy from the death in the spare, damp, moldy beds. So it was very real in her time. Now let's read on. I have some more stuff to share. While in Rhode Island, a letter was received from you, but it was impossible to answer it. My eyes were so bad with inflammation I could not write or read. Do you remember what I said about the vision and mold? Sister White experienced that. I took a violent cold from sleeping in damp, moldy beds, which settled all over me but affected my eyes badly. I thought it impossible for me to go before the public at all, but my husband persuaded me to go, and after speaking a few minutes, the pain and heat left my eye. I talked twice to a large congregation in Westerly. My eyes have not yet fully recovered fully, but they are much better. Here's another one. She talks about damp, muggy weather. Our meeting closed last night. Willie came into our tent and read independent paper. Through the evening, he made the remark that it seemed good to him to get a few minutes to read. We remained 2 days longer than we expected, that we might keep with Willie. He said he could not conscientiously leave here sooner. I feared we would all be sick. The ground is so damp and the weather so muggy, without refreshing breezes, and that the smell is moldy. I love the South. I was born in the Deep South and raised in the Deep South. But it's damp and muggy and moldy here. It is. And so we have to be very careful. We have to be careful where we build our homes. We have to be careful how we build our homes. Let's read on. Here's another one. My mind goes back to Oak Hill Cemetery in Battle Creek, Michigan. I see there 2 graves. My noble firstborn son fills the long grave. Next comes the short grave where lies my darling babe, my last born. The first died of inflammation of the lungs after a sickness of 8 days in consequence to thoughtlessly resting his head upon a pile of damp charts and falling asleep. Charts were made of paper, right? Paper is mold food. Okay? The second died from sleeping in a room that had not been used for 2 weeks. A fire was kept burning for 2 hours in this room, which was thought sufficient to warm it. The bed had accumulated dampness. Myself and child took cold. He was a great sufferer for 4 weeks and died in consequence of that damp bed. So it's real. It was real in her day, and she recognized, she didn't understand that it, all that it did, but she described a lot of what I've described to you about the symptoms of mold toxicity. Okay, here is a link that you can go to find more information about mold toxicity being called inhalational Alzheimer's. And who knows about chemtrails? Everybody knows about chemtrails being sprayed in the sky. Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt has done a lot of studies on that. So has Dane Wigington, geoengineeringwatch.org, I think is his site. But Dr. Dietrich Klinghardt has found that mold spores are being sprayed in those chemtrails. Why is that necessary? Yes, I heard somebody say it. I won't repeat what I heard. Y'all heard it too. So. This is an actual photograph of the picture of the house that I got super sick in. We rented 2 houses that were really moldy. We didn't realize it. This was not like that when we first rented the house. We went away on vacation for a couple of weeks, and when we came back, what's that thing that goes like this and looks like a radiator in an air conditioner? Whatever, that thing, it froze up in the air conditioner, and there was a pan underneath that was full of water, and that pan was overflowing and it had flooded the basement with water, and this mold was the bottom part of the HVAC system. I don't understand all that stuff, but anyway, you know what I mean. And so where it had gotten wet was, and this is Stachybotrys. That's the baddie. That's the bad guy. That was in the house where my husband and I were living. And I got so sick. I was constantly throwing up, nauseated, falling into walls. I couldn't stand up straight. We had to leave. And when we left, let me show you a couple more pictures here before we do that. Sheetrock and carpets. I mentioned that paper is mold food. Well, sheetrock on one side is what? Paper, okay? Carpets are mold food, okay? And so all of these things in a house may seem innocent, but it's feeding the mold. And this picture of the carpet here is the actual house that we lived in. And you can see the mold there on the baseboard. The one on the left I put in there, that was a house that was being showed to us in Kalen's hometown in Goodrich, North Dakota. And the lady had assured us that the house did not have any mold. When I opened that cupboard and I saw that, she said, just wipe that with a little bleach, it'll be fine. Don't do that. Bleach makes mold mad, and it produces more mycotoxins. That is not the way to clean it up. It has to be removed. Okay? All right, this is what happened. That's my little car. That's the house that we rented. I loved being there. It was on a cattle farm. The view was phenomenal. It was spectacular. The sunsets and sunrises were gorgeous. But I was dying in that house. And so this is a lot of our belongings here. We ended up, we lost all of our furniture. We had to burn a lot of it. That dresser that you see my husband taking apart was his grandmother's. It had to go. We had to burn it. And so we lost a lot to the mold. And we just burned it. That's watching our stuff go up in flames right there. It's a very expensive illness. Okay? So the after effects, we have yet to find a rental or a home that we have stayed in that does not have mold. Okay? Now, we are guests in Yemi and Claude's home. I haven't seen any mold in there, thank the Lord. So, but I hadn't been snooping either. I won't snoop, I promise. And it has brought a constant sense of being unsettled, because we lost everything. We still have our belongings. I was able to save a lot of our clothing because I was able to wash it in some, I forget what all I used, but I know I used ammonia and clove essential oil are supposed to be really strong to kill mycotoxins. It's embarrassing to go to places and to have to tell people, your house is making me sick. People get offended. People really get offended. And so it's a very difficult disease to have to deal with, a difficult toxicity to have to deal with. And again, it's financially devastating. And it does bring, strained relationships. So anyway, people just don't understand. That's why I'm trying to educate people now. So the first rule of recovery, let me fast forward here. You will not recover if you are still being exposed. You have to get out. Okay? There are a couple things you can do until you get out, like taking binders. I think it's L-carnitine. I think that's the right amino acid. There's an amino acid that you can take that is very helpful. But really, the only thing you can do to really begin to heal is get out. Just get out. And I know of a physician, she was in that Colorado flood years ago. Boulder had all those floods. And her office basement flooded. And when she realized what was wrong with her, she walked out of her office, left everything, and never set foot back in her office again. And that was very difficult for her. So you have to leave your contaminated belongings behind. Anything that you bring that's contaminated will contaminate your new environment. Okay? And again, I was able to save some of our things by a special washing. What did I do to help myself get over the mold toxicity? I am very sensitized now, so if I'm exposed, I get sick pretty quick with this. But saunas, sweating, anything you can do to sweat, sunlight took a huge burden off my liver and my kidneys and really helped a lot with the kidney pain that I was having and the liver pain, because I did have liver pain. You must keep your bowels open. You know, people get a little irate sometimes because I get a little up close and personal because I talk about the bowels a lot. But it's important. You have to keep these avenues of elimination open and moving well, okay? At least 2 bowel movements a day. Increase bile flow. You can get sunflower lecithin. You can take a teaspoon of that a couple, 2-3 times a day, and that really helps a lot with bile flow. Bile is like detergent. It helps to get out toxins, okay? You can take binders like charcoal. Okra powder is a very good binder for mycotoxins. We designed our binder blend called Cuff'em specifically for people with heavy metal toxicity and mold toxicity. So we have that blend. It's available on our store. And then fulvic minerals, which we recently started carrying, that helps to remove glyphosate or Roundup from the body, and it also gives you minerals, and it also helps to heal. It's very healing to the gut. You really won't heal unless you have enough minerals. So again, keep the bile thin and moving. Glyphosate, if you have glyphosate toxicity, it just about completely stops your bile flow. And every one of you, I guarantee you, if we did a glyphosate test on everyone in this room, you would all have it. And so you really need to work on your bile flow. It really makes it thick and sludgy. And I mentioned earlier about you can have more mycotoxins than bile. Bitter foods such as radishes, peppermint, arugula, endive, these are all very good. I think Brussels sprouts are also any food that has kind of a little bit of a bitter taste. Dandelion, milk thistle, these are all good to help with the gentian or wormwood. These are all good herbs to help to increase bile flow. And then I mentioned the sunflower lecithin. Oops, I don't want to skip that one because this is, remember I mentioned at the beginning of the talk, the sinus infection that a lot of people get? There is a bacteria. It's called multiple antibiotic resistant coagulase negative staphylococci. That's a mouthful, so we just call it Marcons. Okay, Marcons tends to grow in the sinuses of people who are exposed to mycotoxins. What's the problem with that? Marcons lowers your MSH or your melanocyte stimulating hormone. That melanocyte stimulating hormone, if it's low, you're going to have high cytokine levels. You're going to have low endorphin levels. That means you're going to have a whole lot of pain. You're going to have achiness, joint pain, muscle aches, and a lot of other stuff with it too there. So mood swings, constipation, diarrhea, leaky gut, and adrenal fatigue are also signs of low MSH. And so you won't heal unless you completely heal your Marcons as well. I'm almost done. I'm going to skip that slide. For mold remediation, all visible mold has to be removed. My husband did some mold remediation on my mother's home on the front porch. It was my dad's man cave, and it was moldy in there. And my husband had to rip all did it have sheetrock? You ripped all the sheetrock out and all the way down to the studs, and then he scrubbed the studs with some kind of special soap stuff. And are y'all hot? I'm roasting up here. Sorry. And then he had to he scrubbed everything. He scrubbed the ceiling, he scrubbed the 2x4s, he scrubbed the floor, and then he painted a special paint over top of that. And then we ran a dehumidifier in there for quite a while. And that's what you have to do. A lot of people like to use essential oils to kill mold, but just a word to the wise, essential oils have to be almost full strength to kill the mycotoxins. You can't just put a few drops in a spray bottle and think that's going to get it. That's not going to get it. Most people say that hydrogen peroxide is the best thing to use. I know a lot of people are promoting vinegar. We have not found vinegar to be as effective as hydrogen peroxide. Okay.
The 3%?
3% you can use, yes. Yeah. But it has to be straight. 3%. Okay. What about temporary housing alternatives? Because you have to leave, and 85% of buildings are contaminated with mold. a canvas tent. I don't know if you've ever seen the old cowboy style canvas tents. We have a video on those tents on our YouTube channel. Our YouTube channel is under my name, Dana Gazelshan. You can go, and I have a few of our cards around here somewhere. That canvas tent is a really good option. You can actually put a wood stove in there to keep it warm in the winter time. And they're very comfortable. There's a couple of types of RVs that are recommended for, we call them moldies. We call ourselves moldies. Nash is supposed to be a good one, and Airstream. But again, a word to the wise, camper trailers tend to accumulate condensation, especially around the windows and stuff. So you're still going to have to deal with some mold. Hotels are usually not a good option because they use a lot of chemicals to cover up odors and stuff in hotels. Sometimes a Vrbo or an Airbnb can, but again, you have to be very careful. So let's look at the key takeaways. Last slide. You will never heal unless you get out of the mold. You will not heal. The Bible is very specific about how mold is to be dealt with, but nobody does that today because nobody can afford to destroy their home. And I get that. So there are mold remediators that can come in and remediate your home. A lot of people try to do it themselves and they get sick, okay, because they're not really prepared to do that. It's something that takes quite a bit of education to do. You must keep your detox pathways open, your bowels moving, you're sweating, your kidneys are well flushed, your lymph is moving by walking and stuff like that. And then taking the binders is very important. Sweating, again, to keep the liver and kidneys supported. And don't forget to treat the sinuses, okay? If you've been in mold, you want to test your sinuses. Is that a question?
Yes.
I'm done. Okay, that's it.
What do you recommend to keep the sinuses clear?
Okay, that's a whole protocol to clear out the sinuses. I am working on that now. I have, you can take equal parts of DMSO and colloidal silver, and you could put like a drop or two of, and I would probably mix this in like a 4-ounce nasal spray bottle. Equal parts of DMSO and colloidal silver, and maybe put a drop or two of eucalyptus essential oil. Yeah, it's ouchy. Yeah, you feel like your eyeballs are going to burn out of your head when you do it. But when I spray that in there, I lean forward so that it doesn't just run right back out. It gets up in my sinuses. Or you can lean your head back, but I find if I lean my head back, it just goes down my throat. So if I lean forward, or kind of almost upside down, it really gets it up in there. So I do that, but I also use, they have this, honey, what's that stuff called? The spray that we're both using. It's XLEAR. You know what I'm talking about? It's xylitol. The sweetener xylitol is a biofilm buster. And when you spray that in your sinuses, it kills the biofilm. If you don't know about biofilm, these bacteria, that's like a shield that they put around themselves to keep anything that you take to kill them from killing them. So I have a whole talk where I talk about biofilms and stuff like that. And it's a real big issue. But if you take that stuff and then you take the mix, but then you might also, because you're killing a lot of stuff, at some point you might need to consider a nasal probiotic because you have a microbiome in your sinuses too.
So I use something called a neti pot.
Yeah.
Neti pot, yes, excellent.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good as well.
Yeah, neti pot is really good. And you could put just a little bit of DMSO in there, and yeah, it does. It burns. But you could put a little bit in there. Karan?
I have recommended for him to use the neti pot and put in some golden seal powder in there, but he didn't want to do it.
Yeah, that would be good. That would be good. Yes, that would be good. There's a lot of things that will kill these Marcons. Certain distributors would have you believe that only their product will kill it, but that's not true. That's not true.
She wants to know what probiotic would you recommend? Like, what should you take for the sinus?
I'm not real. There's a company that makes, they call it Marcons A and Marcons B. That's what I started out taking, but y'all, it's insanely expensive. And so I looked at what they've got in the Marcons B, I think is the one that is the killer, that, and it's got stuff in it that I can do at home. The probiotic, I don't know what, how we would find a way around that, but you can find nasal probiotics online. I don't have a specific one that I like, and I don't like the Marcons A and B because they're so expensive. I don't think it needs to be that expensive. And I'll tell you something else. With that company, and Kaylin will verify this, it's a little 2-ounce bottle. Marcons A costs $75, and so does Marcons B. 2 ounces. I unscrewed the lid from one of those bottles, I don't remember which one it was, and that little thing, that little straw that goes down in there, was only about 1 inch long. So you could only use half the product in there. I was very unhappy when I saw that. So, yes ma'am.
What is the what is that?
The Marcons is that staphylococcal bacteria that grows. It grows in a lot of environments that mold does, and so it tends to, when you're in mold and your body is low, your immune system is low, this bacteria takes up residence because it grows in conjunction with mold.
So once you get rid of the Marcons, then the mold, it's like you hitting both of them at the same time.
That's kind of the last step. When you're treating mold toxicity, you have to treat some other things first, but then you have to also treat the sinuses, or you'll never completely heal. The sinuses is usually the last step.
So do you remember some of the ingredients that was in the Marcon?
You remember I mentioned the colloidal silver? They use EDTA, and it's some type of colloidal silver. I don't remember the brand. And then it's got some eucalyptus. That's all I remember. But you can go online and find Marcons A and B. Just type in Marcons A and B, and that will come up, and then you can see the ingredients. Now, they'll tell you it's a proprietary blend, and it is, and you may not get it exactly right. But I was listening to a podcast by this doctor that created the test for Marcons, and he said, DMSO will kill it, colloidal silver will kill it, and he listed off all these things, and I thought, I'm done with Marcons A and B. So, yes, ma'am.
Going to the grains, is there anything you can soak them in to get the
Mycotoxins
out?
A lot of people soak their stuff in vinegar, and I mentioned I haven't found as much success with vinegar. The problem with grains is you don't know, you can't always see it if it's there. That's a big problem. That's why a lot of the people like Dr. Peter Osborne, he is very strict with his clients. He says no grains. He will not let them have any grains when he's recovering them at all.
And especially rice.
Yes, rice.
You need to eat it within 24 hours.
That's right.
It's growing mold.
That's right. Rice is very... I have a little video that I did when we met Barbara O'Neill, I guess it's been about a year ago, and it's called Watch Your Moldy Rice, where she shared about that. Yes, sir.
So we're trying to switch from white rice and brown rice to the black and the red rice. Does that apply to those type rices as well?
Any kind of rice I would definitely use more quickly. Wait a minute, Brother Ike, don't be mad at me. He's mad at me. Brother Ike is mad at me. Let me say this. You're getting more nutrition from the black rice and the red rice. You are. But you do need to just cook what you need for the day. So, are you better now?
That's uncommon.
Okay, he's better now.
Well, if you like recook it, even if you have already cooked it, right? But now you put it in the refrigerator, it's key. So can you like recook it and that'll kill the mold?
According to when I was with Barbara O'Neill, on this. She said no. She said after, just make what you need, and she won't, if she goes to a potluck, she will not eat rice. And I don't mean to make her the absolute authority on anything. None of us are. But, you know, my friend, who she used to run the Living Springs there, Cynthia Bonus, she said that she cooked some rice on Friday for the Sabbath, and when she came after it cooled in the evening to put it in the refrigerator, she saw little filaments coming up out of it. Yeah. It's mold filaments.
Someone just asked me to ask a question. Quinoa.
Quinoa is much better.
It's much better.
Much
Does
better.
that mold up as well, or do you have to eat it in a specific
No,
amount of time?
it's not as prone to mold. Look at the environment that rice is grown in.
It's a wet environment.
So it's going to have a lot of mold spores, mycotoxins that are already there. So it's like it's pre-inoculated. Okay, so you got to be careful. Any other questions? I know it's late, and I know you guys have been here a long time. I don't want to keep you any longer than you want to stay, but if you have questions, I'll stay. So,
I have another question.
are you? You're not mad at me?
No.
Okay.
I'm so grateful that you're bringing all of this information for us, because sometimes we don't know, and the more you know, the better. But my son gets nosebleeds, and he sometimes when he's active, like say him and I are playing, his heart races, like he gets real, his heart palpitates. Now, I don't know if that could be due to maybe mold toxicity, but he gets up in the morning and there's always blood coming out of his nose. We think it's a vitamin K deficiency, so we give him D with K. It helps, but it still happens. So we're leaning now, since you presented the information, that it's maybe mold toxicity that he's suffering from that's causing him to have these nosebleeds and the heart palpitation. Could that be something that
It could be. Heart palpitations are definitely, a symptom of mold toxicity, but they're also a symptom of parasite toxicity. So is nosebleed and blood in the stool. So I wouldn't rule out either one of those, but I'm not saying that it is either one of those either. So, yes. I think she was first, and then we'll come back, Nancy. That's okay.
Is there a way, we weren't here last night, but and we didn't get a chance to see the whole video, we were looking at it this morning, but is there a way to diagnose? How do you know if you have parasites? Like,
who knows? Who remembers? Who remembers? 2 fingers. Do you feel a pulse? Right here? You feel your pulse? Okay, she feels her pulse. Somebody tell her. Brother Ike, tell everybody what that means.
That means if you have a pulse, that means you have parasitic.
That's right. I hope you feel it.
That's correct.
That's right.
I'm talking about excess, like, because we saw some on the video this morning before we got to church. It was like a whole lot coming out of the colon.
Yeah.
How do you know you don't have a whole nest like that?
You don't.
You just have the regular amount that a normal person would have. If you just have a baby nest of how do you know if you have a nest full?
Well,
or not?
that person that in the video, you probably saw the little video thing. That person probably had a bowel obstruction, and so they were probably having a lot of nausea and vomiting and gut pain and stuff like that. Couldn't go to the bathroom. That he probably had what we call a surgical abdomen, which means he came into the ER. I don't know what's wrong, so they just opened him up to see what's going on, and that's what they found. I don't know that was the case, but I suspect that that's what happened. But if you do the parasite detox, I shared some of my story last night when I went into acute hepatitis and my liver swelled all up. The Lord told me what was wrong with me. I was asking Him, what is wrong? Parasites is what kept coming to my mind. And when I did the parasite detox, not to gross anybody out, but I passed a huge wad of mucus that was full of roundworms. And so You know, that could be any of us. We don't know. But anything that would quit wiggling long enough to get a fork in it, I would eat it. That's how I grew up, you know. And so, thankfully, I became vegetarian when I was in my early 20s. So that was better, but I still have parasites to deal with, even though I've been vegan for umpteen years, longer than I haven't.
So were you able to share the protocol that you followed to?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about it on that video. If you go finish the video, I have another video that I show at the end. I show a picture of the video called, what did I call that? How to do the parasite detox clarification, I think is what I named it. And that shows, and then I wrote a booklet on how to do it, how to actually do the parasite.
Thank you.
Yes?
So if you're doing a mold detox, you also need to do a parasite cleanse. Right?
That's a good idea because, remember, well, you weren't here last night, but parasites harbor mold toxins. See, parasites are in our body to eat up garbage. And if we have garbage toxins in our body, the parasites are going to be there, okay? They serve some purpose as long as we're toxic. So that's why I always include, you're not doing a detox unless you're doing also a parasite detox. You know, you've got to get the levels down, you know, just by virtue of the fact that you're doing a parasite detox, you're getting rid of heavy metals, you're getting rid of candida, you're getting rid of mold spores, mold mycotoxins, because they're in the parasites. So once you get the overgrowth down so that they're not making you sick with their waste that they're putting inside of you, then you can start dealing more with a heavy metal detox or a candida detox or what have you.
So where did we go to see last night's presentation?
It's
You could go to YouTube for the church, or you could go to her website. She has.
it's not, that one's not, well, I have a presentation, but not the one from last night. Yeah, the only reason we're recording today is because we don't have this one on our site.
Forest City First Seventh Adventist Church.
Yeah. Maybe somebody can share a link. I think I have a link I can share with you on that. So, are there any other questions or anything?
That's how we get here this morning. I showed my family your video.
Oh, okay.
And they get dressed for church in 10 minutes. I don't know how to do
it. Okay. That's like my husband. He gets ready in 15 minutes and he's like, it's taking you so long.